So much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Michelle Wu, and I am sitting in for our chair of the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Transportation, Councilor Sal LaMattina, who apologizes. He had to be at a wake today, so couldn't make it, but he's been hosting on the council side a series of policy briefings, and then on the academic expert side, we're very proud to partner with Professor Peter Firth from Northeastern. So today is the fourth of these briefings, and our specific topic is transit signal priority. This is docket number 0126, order that the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Transportation host a series of policy briefings related to key topics in transportation policy. So as usual, we'll have our presentation by Professor Firth, and then open it up for questions. Due to some scheduling anomalies today, we will actually only have the live stream running for our viewing audience until 5 p.m. today. So we'll do the best to make sure that covers as many questions as possible. And maybe we'll go to live tweeting at that point once it cuts off. Thank you again, Professor Firth. All yours.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Councilor Wu, for hosting this series and for the chance to talk today about a very important subject, priority for transit. I'm not going to talk only about signal priority, but about priority more broadly. So if I could, I would whisk you off to a place where you could see what transit priority looks like. Like I would take you to Zurich, where I went because I'd heard a rumor that the streetcars, or trams as they call them over there, never get red light. It's not that they don't have to stop at red lights. If the light is red, they have to stop. It's just that the light is always green. So I went there to see if it's true. I found out that, well, there are a couple places where there are so many trams coming from different directions, one has to stop for another. But that otherwise, no, you're sitting on a tram, you see a light ahead of you, it's red, the tram starts to slow down from 25 miles an hour to about 20 miles an hour, and just then the light turns green. And the tram just goes right on through. I'd take you to The Hague, where you would see that kind of transit priority. You'd see bus lanes, and just simply an attitude among anybody that you talk to. Well, of course we give priority for transit. How stupid could you be to not do that? I don't have to take you to Europe. I could take you to Portland, where Portland's light rail, the traffic signals are set up so that as the train goes from one station to the next station, it gets a green wave the whole way through. And all the buses have little devices on them that send a message to the traffic signals, hey, I'm a bus. If you can hold the light green for me, do it. And buses get priority. I could even take you to Utah, to Salt Lake City, and you would see that their light rail gets priority. What we have in Boston, I don't want to don't think that we don't have transit priority. We do, but we basically have, it's either all or nothing. Either we spend $1 billion to put a transit line underground, something like that, or nothing. And that just doesn't make sense. We certainly don't have enough money to put all of our high-volume bus routes underground, make them all grade separated. And if our only choices are, multi-billion or nothing, well, then we're stuck. No, we have to learn from these other cities that we can do something without going underground. Maybe one doesn't have to give these arguments, but let me give you 5 reasons why transit priority makes sense. First of all, getting people to use transit is good for society. Okay? Even if you don't use transit, we are all better off if other people would use transit. It's better for our air quality, it's better for climate change, sustainability, reduces congestion, makes our cities more livable and vibrant. And here in this city council hearing, we have to think about what's our future, not just 1 or 2 years out, but what's our 20-year future? What's our 40-year future? Are we going to be a city that's just all choked in traffic and everybody's yelling at each other and honking as we're trying to get by one another? Or are we going to be a city with first-class public transportation where people can get to places quickly, reliably, without having to drive their own car? And it's priority for transit that determines whether people are switching to transit or from transit. In most of the Western world, as people have become, when people were poor, well, they couldn't afford cars, walking is slow, everybody used transit. As people became wealthier, and you see this happening in countries all over, transit is so slow, they get a car so they can go fast. And that's a vicious cycle because the more those people get cars, the more congested the roads get. Car drivers can find a way out because they can use bypasses. Transit can't just go take another route. And so transit is slow, so more people switch to buying cars. But with priority, it turns it on its head. Now, people say, well, I don't have time to drive a car. I got to use transit because transit gets the priority and moves faster. A third reason, of course, it's people that we're serving, not cars. That's obvious. But the standard tools of our trade, and I speak now as a traffic engineer, the standard tools of our trade worry about moving vehicles, not people. So they count a bus, well, it's just another vehicle. And that's a big mistake. On Huntington Avenue, actually, I got updated figures on that. I got the wrong ones. It's 3% of the traffic that's buses and trams. And together they carry 70% of the people on that road. But 97% of the traffic is private cars, and they are ruining your transit route. I've already mentioned that cars can find another route. But what that means is if you do something to help transit and it hurts cars, actually cars won't be hurt as much as you think because they'll find another route. And as I said, all or nothing doesn't make sense. So one research project I had a student of mine work on is let's grade our traffic system. One of its objectives should be to be a good host for public transportation. Our buses and streetcars, they have to operate on the surface. So how good a job is our traffic system doing? Or another way of measuring it, how much does traffic congestion harm transit? The way we did the studies, we looked at, well, how long does it take the buses to get from here to there when there isn't much traffic, and then compare it to when there is, and then make some adjustments to account for, well, if you have more people to pick up, of course, that's going to take more time. So we accounted for all that. And we looked at not only how much more time it takes, but also how much worse the reliability is because of traffic congestion, because traffic congestion has a huge reliability effect. And so we didn't look at all the routes, but we looked at some routes. We looked at Route 1, for instance, with 4 million passengers a year. And the traffic congestion costs the MBTA almost $1 million a year in additional wages they have to pay to have more drivers, because the time it takes for a driver to turn around is so long, they have to have more drivers. And then they have to have more recovery time. And then the impact to riders, 2.3 million, 3.8 million. In total, transit is hurting Route 1 to the tune of $7 million a year. Did that for several routes. We did that for 9 routes. For those 9 routes, some of which were big routes, some of which were not very high demand routes, traffic congestion is hurting transit to the tune of $45 million. On a per rider basis, about $1.75. If we made the private traffic pay for the harm that they're doing to transit riders, they should be paying about 50 cents per rider back to the MBTA. Our traffic system should back to the MBTA for the extra costs, and $1.25 to each rider. Sorry, rider, we stole so much of your time by not giving you a nice free-flowing road for your vehicles to ride on. So my conclusion, as grading the system, my conclusion, the grade, it gets an F. To the extent, our traffic system has a few different functions, but one of those functions is it should be a good host for transit. And in that respect, the grade is F. You see things around Boston and you ask, how is this allowed to happen? So the Silver Line has its own busway. We spent $750 million. This is the all or nothing solution. We spent $750 million to put the Silver Line underground. So as long as it's underground, yeah, it's free from traffic congestion. And then it has to cross D Street. And buses with 60 people, maybe even more, still can have to wait up to 60 seconds. It used to be 80 or 90 seconds. They got it down to 60 seconds. It's still in the horrible range. Sometimes only 3, 4, 5 cars going by. Bus stays red. The light stays red for the bus, stays green for the car. Why is this allowed to happen? Well, it's a popular game around here in which Agency 1 says, oh, well, that's Agency 2. You see, that's the MBTA. And the MBTA says, oh, well, you see, it's the city. And the city says, oh, well, you see, it's Massport. And then it's the state. And then in the end, nobody takes responsibility. And it's an interesting thing. There isn't a culture here of complaining about how slow transit is. I mean, we complain to each other, but the phone is not ringing off the hook at City Hall or anywhere else. People, I don't know, we got used to it. We're not complaining about it. And so it just goes on. If you go by Roxbury Crossing, which I pass by every day on my commute, you can often see 3, 4, 5 buses in the left turn bay waiting to turn left. The light turns green. There's enough time for 2 or 3 of them to get through, but some of those buses, they have to wait another cycle. A cycle is 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So, in the end, buses are waiting 3 minutes to turn left just because they aren't given enough green time. And as a traffic engineer, I can tell you, giving them the green time they need wouldn't hurt the cars a bit. Nobody would even notice it. So why is this happening? I lay blame in several places. First, the MBTA isn't doing what I think it ought to be doing. I mean, they ought to have somebody who's looking around, where are the buses getting stuck, and at least complaining about it, requesting, can you do something about it? Even going beyond that, coming up with creative solutions. I lived in Brussels for a year and studied transit priority in Europe, and Brussels was a good example. And Brussels' version of the MBTA, which is called STEEB, they have a position called the Director of Network Development, and this person is studying not just where can we put new routes, but all the existing routes. Where are the buses getting stuck in traffic? He knows some traffic engineering. He's got traffic engineers on his staff. They're coming up with solutions. They're going to the city and saying, you've got an intersection here that's causing a lot of trouble for my buses. What can we do about it? And they're working together to come up with solutions. So that mechanism is just missing. The way the way agencies have been set up, the way things are, the MBTA just says, well, what can we do about it? And we don't own the roads. And the city says, hey, we let the buses ride on our roads just like any other vehicle. We're not against buses. And in the end, things like this happen. Huntington Avenue, as I mentioned before. It's worth bringing to light. I know this is something that happened in Brookline, whereas I'm advising Boston City Council, but it's the same cast of characters. It's the same traffic consultants. It's the same attitude. It's the same everything. Brookline got a brand new traffic signal system and didn't get priority. No, there is not another city in the United States that got a new traffic signal system in the last 10 years that has light rail that did not include as part of that system priority for light rail. Sacramento, San Jose, San Diego. I already mentioned Utah, Houston. I mean, unthinkable that they would get a new traffic signal system without priority. In the Boston general thinking, yeah, priority just wasn't part of it. Not only was priority not part of it, but as I don't know if you can see in this picture, but there's a little white bar here. And the lights for the green line, instead of giving green, yellow, and red, they have white bars. And then when the bar is horizontal, it's a red light. You can't go. When the bar is vertical, green light, you can go. And so here, you can see where the cars have a green arrow. Cars can go, you see the cars are advancing, while the trolley, which has exactly the same conflicts as the car. So if it's safe for the cars to go, it's safe for the trolley to go. But no, trolley has a red bar for 15 seconds till finally the trolley gets its green bar. How did that happen? I don't know. I noticed it because this used to be part of my commute. I brought it to the attention of the town. I brought it to the attention of the MBTA. It took more than a year to fix it. All it needs is just a little switch in the signal program to say, why should the trains not get a green when the cars are getting a green? So we don't have the mechanisms, the incentives in place. Nobody's measuring. Nobody's getting rewarded, or the opposite, for are you doing a good job to make sure that transit is being served well. At the state level, because the MBTA is a separate agency from the cities and towns, we need somebody at a higher level, that would be the state, that includes incentives so that any state project that includes priority for transit would, get some extra money or move to the top of the pile or something like that. The state should have that interest in, we want transit priority, because of course it's not just Boston, it's Cambridge, it's Somerville, it's Brookline, it's Milton, it's everywhere. And then here within the city, something has to change to make priority for transit an institutional priority. There have to be objectives, and then some measurement against those objectives, and then some incentives, some rewards. It's got to be somebody's job, because right now, it really is nobody's job to look out for transit. If the city gets an official complaint from the MBTA, I think they respond to it, but the MBTA isn't sending them complaints. And so things just go on the way there are. It probably means some additional staffing, or maybe realignment of what staffing is. And I have a lot of students who are good at traffic engineers and love to solve problems, and some of them probably would love to serve as interns for the city, and studying some of these places where they could give transit priority and come up with solutions. What kind of solutions to give transit priority? Well, it's always good to first ask about low-tech stuff. That stuff, we could do tomorrow. Stuff we could do in the coming year's plan. So, there's a lot we could do with signal timing to favor buses. As I said, the standard tools in our profession, a bus is just another vehicle. We try to come up with a good signal timing for all the vehicles. We don't really give much attention to buses. Where buses really get the shaft is when they're turning left with a left turn arrow. Left turn movements usually get a very short green, and then that means they have a long red. And then when there's more buses that can fit, like I was describing at Roxbury Crossing, they can wait and wait and wait. Don't I have a picture of this? I have a picture of this somewhere. I wanted to show you. This one. So I don't know how well you can see it, but we got a line of about 5 buses waiting at a red light. They're going to get a green light that's long enough for 3. Maybe those bus drivers are trained to be aggressive. I think 4 will be able to get through. Why is this happening? If you low tech, if you give those left turns a longer green, it will hardly hurt traffic. Why? Because there are detectors, and it'll only hold the green as long as there are still cars going. So if you've got a left turn phase that's now got a 15-second maximum green, and you say, let's make that 22 seconds. That doesn't mean it's now going to run 22 seconds. Maybe all they need on average is 17 seconds. So one time maybe they will use the 22 seconds. But the next time, because they got so many people through, they're only going to need 12 seconds. And the next time they might use 16 seconds. The next time they might use 18 seconds. On average, they're only going to use what they need. So it hardly hurts to give them a longer green extension. There are a few places where we could reduce transit delays dramatically with a simple change like that. Another trick is reservice, where you give a phase 2 green intervals in one cycle. This is really handy when there's a long cycle. Like I mentioned, Roxbury Crossing, 1 hour, 2 minute and 15 seconds for the cycle. Right now, there's just one period in there that the buses can go, make their left turn, and if they miss that, wait 2 minutes till your turn comes up again. So you could say at the beginning of when Tremont Street moves, a left turn for the buses, and then again at the end, another one. And that way, the biggest red period would be about a minute, and the delay would be cut a lot. We can coordinate signals for bus movements, where there's a heavy bus flow, turning left, going into terminals. Simply changing the sequence instead of, if there are four conflicting streams getting their greens and it goes in order 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, it won't make any difference to the cars if you make it 1, 2, 4, 3. But that could make a lot of difference for the buses. An example of that is the Silver Line, Washington Street, turns around not far from here, downtown crossing on Temple Street. They wait on Temple Street, pick up their load, and then they come out to Tremont Street, where they usually have a green light. They wait for the green light. Finally, they get the green light, they turn onto Tremont Street, and what are they greeted with? One very short block away, immediately a red light, guaranteed, because the lights are coordinated for through traffic on Tremont Street. That bus didn't come from Tremont, that bus came from Temple. But if you know that at the beginning of the Temple phase, there's often a bus turning left, you could say, well, therefore, let's keep the light green at the next few intersections at West Street, at Avery Street, and then maybe we can even get Boylston Street in there. So when the bus comes out at Temple Place, when it gets a green at Tremont Street, green, 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 all the way, then it's turning on to Boylston Street. Be easy to do. At Ruggles Station, we studied that, and we saw the same kind of, bus uncoordination. The buses wait and wait and wait for a green light, finally get the green light, and then go a half a block, and there's a red light waiting for them. Easy to change. Another low-tech priority solution is to create bus lanes by having peak period parking restrictions. I grew up in Washington, D.C., where this is just, it was a normal part of life. No parking, 7 to 9 a.m. It's a bus lane. I moved to Boston 40 years ago and wondered, how come they don't have bus lanes like that? I'm still wondering. So Everett now has taken the lead. Everett, Mass. has made a peak period and morning peak period bus lane on Main Street. So that's a great idea. Sometimes the bottleneck for buses is actually just in a short area. It's just this one area. If the buses could have a bypass lane, we could provide buses a bypass lane with some peak hour parking restrictions. Bus stop improvements. Having the buses stop at the far side of the intersection instead of the near side. People in the business understand that pretty well now, and they're doing some of that. Having bus bulb outs. So here you see, instead of the bus pulling up into the curb pulls out to the bus. And you might think, oh, that's terrible. That means the bus is going to stop right in the middle of a traffic lane. That's really going to hurt traffic. So, interestingly, San Francisco tried that. And what they found is it didn't hurt traffic a bit. In fact, it helped traffic. Because when the bus pulls in, normally what the bus is pulling into is a parking lane. It's not big enough to fit the bus anyway. The bus's tail is still sticking out and blocking the travel lane. When the curb comes out, now the bus can more quickly get to its spot. The bus can actually line up with the curb, so when the passengers are getting on and off, it's quicker because they can actually step from the curb onto the bus instead of step from the curb down to the street up onto the bus. So the bus gets its business done, gets out of there more quickly. It actually made traffic go better as well as making the bus go better. And then consolidating stops. We just have way too many stops. Priorities and attitude. If you care, if you look, I'm not guaranteeing there's a solution to everything. Sometimes traffic is just so bad. It's hard to find a solution. But I often will have my students have to work on projects, that's part of education. Got to work on a project. Instead of Mickey Mouse project, I give them real projects. Go figure out why the buses are getting stuck and see if you can come up with a solution. They usually can come up with a solution. For instance, last year I had a student look at the Silver Line on Washington Street. It's got bus lanes for most of its corridor, but no bus lanes at the two ends. No bus lane around Dudley Station. And that last stretch coming from Melnia Cass getting into Dudley, the buses were going on average 4.5 miles an hour. I mean, you may as well walk. They were having 2 to 4 minutes of delay just trying to get in there. So we studied it. We studied the observations, filming, modeling with simulation. We found what the problem was. There's the bottleneck. It's actually after the station, but that was causing a backup, and that jam was just propagating backwards and slowing everything down. With our model, we could replicate current conditions, including pedestrians walking like crazy across the street anywhere they want to. We managed to model that. And showed how with some improvements to the traffic signal, we take care of all the traffic, we take care of the buses, and the delay goes down by 2 minutes on average. We did a study at Ruggles Station. You can see the results there. We saw you can go from 80 seconds of delay. This was at just 4 signals in the vicinity of Ruggles Station, down to 20 seconds with some standard solutions, and down to 40 seconds with standard solutions, down to 20 seconds with some smart signal priority. And as far as the D Street, where the Silver Line buses are stuck, there are 5 easy solutions. So I'm gonna give you number 6. Just put a police officer there. Stop traffic and let the buses go. Now, I know the main objection to that costs money. Well, maybe if it costs money, somebody would finally have an incentive. Hey, could we get the machines to do this so we don't have to spend all this money? You're taking 60 people and making them wait, even if it's just an unnecessary half a minute, and you're doing that about 20 times an hour. That's a lot more time than 1 hour per person. That's like, I didn't do that. I don't know. That's 20 or 30 hours of the public's time. Just have one police officer spend an hour to save the rest of us 20 hours. That's a reasonable use of resources. We shouldn't have to waste a person hour to stand there and do it. We should be able to have machines that you detect there's a bus, you turn the light red, the bus gets a green light. The bus only needs like 6 or 10 seconds. I forgot one of my standard lines. If we can put a man on the moon, we ought to be able to get the light to turn green when the bus gets there. Okay, how does signal priority work? We have to have some way of detecting there's a bus. The old way, we actually, put a loop in the road that acted like an antenna that could pick up a very weak signal a bus gives off. Hello, I'm a bus. But nowadays we can have virtual antennas because the GPS systems are so good. We can just have the bus programmed. When you get to the point when you are 42.3 meters from the stop line, send out a signal. So I can have a virtual detector for check-in, for check-out. And then the bus can send a message. So actually that's cool. The GPS advances mean we can do this without digging up the street, without really adding any more traditional infrastructure. So the bus can just, when it's just at the right place, it sends a signal to the traffic signal controller. Hello, I'm a bus. If the light is green, I'll be there very soon. Hold the light green for me. That's the basic transit priority. We actually had transit priority on the Green Line starting in the late 1980s. But by the 1990s, when I asked about it, they told me that most of the wires leading from the loop detector had been torn up by the MBTA's own maintenance staff when they were doing maintenance on the track. Most people weren't even aware that the system was still there because the drivers weren't getting any light saying, oh, we've detected you or given you priority. And the system was just kind of allowed to fall apart. There's a couple intersections where it's still working. Don Burgess could show them to you. But this is not complicated. But now I want to give some maybe more difficult news, which is that while we can buy off-the-shelf software, hardware for doing transit priority, experience in America is that those off-the-shelf solutions are often pretty anemic. Sometimes we're only getting delay reductions of 2 or 3 seconds per intersection. We're not getting that much. Washington Street Silver Line is the one place where Boston has been running priority, and it doesn't really do that much good. We studied it to find out why. And it turned out it's kind of logical. So you can group the intersections where Washington Street has a bus lane into 3 classes. One class is where it's intersecting with a minor street. And at those minor streets, the light is almost always green for Washington Street. Say 70 seconds green for Washington Street, 20 seconds green for the other street. So the buses are nearly always, they'll get a green light most of the time without any priority. So putting in priority, that makes things better, but things are so good already, you can hardly make things better. So that's one group. Then we've got really busy intersections, Mass Ave, Melnia Cass, and the priority system is set up in such a way that if the cross street has a lot of traffic, well, we just disable the priority completely, so no priority at all at those. And then there's only one in-between intersection, that was at East Berkeley Street. So that's why we're not getting too much out of that. So what I've learned is that to get good performance, you got to do more than just take your off-the-shelf solutions. You have to then work with it. So, for instance, the one I was talking about for the Silver Line on Tremont Street, where once they come out of Temple to get them a green at all these other places. See, the reason that the standard solutions wouldn't work is that when the bus is on Temple, it can't send a signal down to West and Avery because that's around the corner. So it's not very complicated, but there has to be some way of saying when the bus is detected at this controller talks to that controller, which talks to the next one, and tells them, I've got a bus. We can do that. We got real smart people that can, program things and wire things. But let me show you for a contrast or describe how in Zurich the transit priority is unbelievable. But they have a staff of people who are working on this all the time. They're thinking of new things, new ideas. When I visited last time, they thought of an interesting transit priority idea. What they discovered was that when the buses came to a stop, I mean, not buses, it's trams. The trams are kind of in the middle of the road, like some of our Green Line. People wanting to get on would run across the street. And sometimes they got hit by cars because it was, they were running across the street. Because we were given priority to the tram, so there was a green light, so they figured, here's what we do. When we detect the tram coming, we'll turn the light red. So then it's safe for people to run across the street, but the light will be red only for as long as it takes for the bus to open and close its doors, and then when the tram is ready to go, it's got a green light again. And that way it's safe for people across the street, and the tram gets priority. So they cook this up, they program it, they make it work, they test it out, it works great. But that's the kind of attention that we need. The first time around, it's never that good. And then you measure it, you improve it, and so on. Sometimes there's so much traffic that you can't do priority for transit only with time, with traffic lights. You have to give them priority in space. One of my students looked at Huntington Avenue, the section in Mission Hill where the Green Line is not in its own reservation. The Green Line there, it's so slow that it's just as quick to walk. I mean, it's terrible. So my students came up with two different options, but basically the solution is, let's make this street the way streets are in Amsterdam, the way streets are in The Hague, the way most streets are in Vienna, where, okay, for each direction, there's a reservation for trams, there's one lane for cars, and then there's the rest, parking, bikes, and pedestrians. And the tram reservation will be paved in such a way so buses can use it too. So basically, I have a transit lane in the middle, then a car lane, one lane for cars. So, yikes, 2 lanes for cars. Now you've only made it 1 lane for cars. How can you do that? Well, what we found is we had to divert 20% of the through traffic. And with 20% of the through traffic diverted, we could get the train delays from 7.7 seconds down to 1.8 seconds. This was a PM peak when outbound was bad. In the AM peak, it's the same thing. Huge improvement in performance. Now, I know it's fair to say, yeah, but you just assumed away 20% of the traffic. Like, we can't do that. So here's my answer. First of all, isn't it interesting? I only had to assume away 20% of the traffic. You might have thought, I'm going from 2 lanes per direction to 1. Don't you have to assume away 50% of the traffic? No. We only have to divert 20% of the through traffic. And is it possible to do that? Of course it is. We've got all kinds of other routes. There are people who are driving from Framingham to the Longwood Medical Area coming down Route 9. But there's another road that's been open since then. I should tell them about it. It's called the Mass Pike. We've got Storrow Drive, we've got Jamaica Way, we've got other roads they can use, and they'll find their way. And a road like that needs to be prioritized for transit. And then the last thing is, the basic framework of our traffic signals, most places in the city, is not inherently friendly to transit. Our standard mode, the mode we use in most of our traffic signals, is coordinated actuated. And when you try to layer transit priority on top of that, you get very small benefits because it has long cycles. That means long red periods. It's inflexible. It's based on having fixed offset. And it doesn't allow for compensation. By compensation, I mean if I take away some of your green time in one cycle, I'll give it back to you in the next. If you can have compensation, then you can have really aggressive priority. My bus needs green right now. Stop everything. Give my bus green. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm going to give you back the green I took away from you, and so you don't develop these long queues and everything. So in order to have good priority, we need to shift the emphasis from coordination. We still need coordination in some places where signals are close. Without coordination, we'd have gridlock. But a lot of places where the signals aren't that close, we can break the coordination. We can let signals run free, as they say, because buses don't come in the coordinated green wave. The green waves are helping cars on the through street, and they're hurting everybody else, the pedestrians, the buses, the left-turning vehicles, the cross street. And then I've also done some studies with some smart signals. Smart signals that do their coordination in an organic way without being fixed, and we get really good benefits. One study that we did in Brookline, we showed that with self-organizing signals and signal priority, we could reduce the delay for the trains down to 7 seconds per intersection. And the average delay for cars, no worse than it was before. And another test that we did, this was on an arterial in Phoenix, we were able to reduce the delay for transit, here it is, down to 5 seconds from its original 20 seconds, while the delay for cars, originally up here, goes down to here. So that's what we should be looking to for the future. But for the conclusion, if we want to give priority for transit, the first thing is for the agencies involved to take responsibility. MBTA, take responsibility. City, take responsibility. State, take responsibility. Just have goals, performance measures, and rewards so that there are mechanisms that will see where the problems are, will find solutions, and we'll keep working until we find good solutions. And then on the technology side, we can still do a lot with low tech. If we're clever at using the controllers we have, we can get better performance than just throwing priority on there in the off-the-shelf way, and then working to the future to try to get some really smart control logic that's flexible, that has that compensation mechanism where we can give the bus priority when it needs, and still we got lots of time left to serve the cars, and we can serve everybody well. So came in under the wire. Time still for a few questions while the live streaming is going.
Yep, so we'll officially conclude the section for the live stream and adjourn. And then if Professor Firth has a few minutes, then we can take questions from the audience in the chamber. So if anyone has questions, please make your way down. You can sit at any of these 5 seats and do so now. While you're thinking and formulating, I just
Well, my interactions with our Boston Transportation Department indicate to me that they're over that. They know that we live in a crowded, popular city, and having a delay-free car ride in the peak hour, it's just not what people expect. The main thing that we're looking at is we want to make sure that we have enough capacity. If the capacity, so it's not so much car delay, but it's if the car capacity gets reduced to the point that now the cars start backing up, and then they start blocking the intersection, and they back up some more, and then they're going to back up and block other streets that buses are in, and it just spills back and spills back and spills back. That's what we want to avoid. So, and I think our Boston transportation staff understand that and operate with that point of